All right, so my son Wilson is in the back, and he just turned 5. And he has a big pile of Cheez-Its, some sunflower seeds, some pretzels, and what else do you have? Some Nutter Butters, right? And he's been back there doing amazing things with these things. He's apparently built some kind of small city. It appears that he's using the sunflower seeds as cars. Sometimes they're little chisels to break up the Cheez-Its. And he's doing all these amazing things, which is the way kids are, right? They live this life of wonder. And I'm really excited for Wilson, because what Wilson maybe doesn't know yet, and I'm telling you right now, Wilson, there are 3 billion people on the planet connecting and collaborating in the air all around us right now. And I see what you're doing with Cheez-Its and sunflower seeds, and I think, oh my gosh, what is he going to do when he starts playing with this stuff? But I'm also really scared, because he's just turned 5, and he's about to go to school. And you would think, why would I be scared about that? Well, my job is at the other end of school. I see what happens at the end of K through 12. I sit in these big lecture halls, and I lecture these students. And if you think about what those 3 billion people on the planet represent, the 3 billion people on the planet who are connected and collaborating on the web make up the most amazing knowledge machine that's ever been invented. But it only works if you have questions and if you have a sense of wonder. Otherwise, it's a big distraction device. And so I was thinking about just this with my own students, and I stopped about midway through my first semester just to pay attention to what the questions they were asking. What are the questions burning in their souls? And the questions burning in their souls are apparently things like, how many points is this worth? How long does this paper need to be? What do we need to know for this test? These are terrible questions. And questions, it's hard for questions to be terrible, because questions are amazing things. They're the most amazing thing that humans do. Think about what a question does. It's three things a question does. A question, first of all, sets you off on a quest. It's right there in the word. It's saying, like, you don't know something, but you're on a quest to know something more. Secondly, it invites connections. If you verbalize a question, you're actually inviting somebody else into your thought process. You're saying, I don't know something. Will you join me in helping me figure this out? And if it stays in your own head, you're at least inviting connections within your own head. And that can go really deep. And then the third thing a question does, which is the most important thing, is that it signals, it represents, it's a manifestation of the fact that you are embracing your vulnerability. You're admitting that you don't know something. You're admitting a sense of weakness, and it's actually captured in the intonation of a question. That's why we raise our pitch. It's sort of making ourselves small. And it's a beautiful thing. It's the most amazing thing. It's the most amazing thing humans do. And I'm worried that sense of wonder might go away, because it's actually really hard to raise a kid with wonder, and I'm going to talk about how hard it is. I want to talk about what wonder looks like first, though, by telling you my own story with wonder and where I found it and what it looked like. So what happened to me was I was in this very same classroom, and I was in this anthropology class, and my anthropology professor was lobbing these answers out at me. Actually, all the students around me are like copying down, what do we need to know? They're going to memorize all this stuff for the test. But I'm this small town kid from Nebraska, and anthropology class it's the study of all humans in all times and all places. And for a small town kid from Nebraska, that meant that my mind was being blown with every little fact that came out. Because every little fact that came out into the audience was telling me that the way I was raised in Nebraska is not the way everybody else grows up. And so I had these burning questions in my soul about what humans are like. How different can we be? And I had to go see the world to find out just how different we could be. So these are the questions that are burning in my soul that took me to New Guinea. So I fly into New Guinea as a 23-year-old just out of college. And I snapped this picture when I first get there. I'm amazed. For a kid in Nebraska to see, a palm tree. This is a big deal. So I snapped the picture, and then I put on my backpack, and I'm just going to go from like hotel to hotel and meet all these people and just have a great time. I just can't wait to open myself up to people and hear their stories and hear what it's like to live on the other side of the world. And so I put my backpack on, and I walk out of the hotel, and there's these 2 guys walking towards me, and they say, "Hey, Moni." And they speak a pidgin English there, so this can be interpreted in one of 2 ways. Either they're saying good morning, like, "Hey, morning," or they're saying, "Give me your money." And So I assume, because I'm a small town kid from Nebraska, like I expect the best from people, and so I'm like, they're saying good morning, and I say, oh, morning, morning, and I joyfully try to walk past them, and they say, no, God, morning, morning. And now I know what they're trying to say, but I still try to stay cheerful, and I pretend I don't understand what they're asking. I say, oh, morning, morning, I try to step past, and they step in front of me. They don't think I'm funny, and the one guy pulls back his coat, and he's got this 2-foot machete there. And I turn my back so that if he slashes at me, he'll just hit my bag, and I just start running. And I run around the corner, and there's this group of people there who were the good people that I thought I was going to meet that morning. They chased these 2 guys off, and I walked straight to the airport. And and I'm looking up at the big board, and there's the board for departures, and it's Brisbane, Sydney, and then a bunch of names that I'm only vaguely familiar with, which are all local towns further into New Guinea. And I realized that Brisbane would be a really great place to spend the summer. But I also know that the answers to the questions that are burning in my soul are not in Brisbane. They're somewhere down the list. And so I get up the courage to go further in. And I just keep going further in, because that's what happens when you have questions, when you actually live with questions. They burn in your soul, and they just cake you on that quest. And so I just kept going, and I kept going further and further until I came to this grass airstrip, and then walked into villages like this where there's no electricity, no running water, and my money's no good. And so I'm living in these villages, and I ended up staying here off and on for over 8 years. Over a course of 8 years, I spent a little over 2 years there during that time. And you can see they grow their own food. They grow their own taro, sweet potato, bananas. They raise pigs. They eat spiders and their eggs. They eat snakes. They eat whatever the snake just ate. And here we are, living in this hut. And at one point, I woke up in the middle of the night. This is early on, about a week after I arrived. And I woke up, and we'd just eaten some snake. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and I can feel this thing laying across my chest. It's like this big around. And I managed to throw it off of me, but as I threw it, I rolled with it. And so I managed to get it pinned down with my left hand, but I try to move my right hand so I can pin it down with 2 hands, but I can't move my right arm. And it's about this time I realize I've actually pinned down my own right arm, like this. And my arm had just fallen asleep and was across me like this. So there was no snake. And this, I have a whole series of funny stories I could tell you about my early days in New Guinea. And the reality is, like, there's this funny edge to them now, but the reality is they represent the worst time of my life. And I look back on it now, and I realize why I was so sad at the time. And it's because, I guess when I went there, I thought that who I was something inside of me that I projected outward. And what I realized when I was there was that who we are is actually reflected back to us by the people around us. And when you're suddenly around people who don't understand you, and who don't know you and don't know why you're there, you lose your own sense of self. You lose your sense of identity. And that's why, for several months, it was so hard. But it was also really beautiful. There's something happened there that cued me into what wonder really looks like, to really be in a state of wonder for a long period of time. And it was in losing myself that I was actually able to open up in a way I'd never been open before. And I learned faster than I've ever learned before. And I was able to just really, in a way, just sit with people in a way I hadn't sat with them before. Just in a sense, in an openness I hadn't had before. And I had really good teachers. Because at one point in this moment of sadness, I was several months of sadness. And one day I was walking along this ridge, and I had gotten so sad that I was just collapsing. And eventually I'm literally on the side of this ridge, just crying. And these 2 guys who are walking behind me, by the time they got up to me, they're crying too. And they don't even know what I'm crying about. And they say, Mike, what are you crying about? And I said, I miss my wife. And they started laughing and laughing. And they said, oh, we would never miss our wives. And then their tears are still coming down, and they sort of get somber, and they start thinking about their kids, and they say, oh, well, we miss our kids. And here's a picture of the 2 guys there who were walking behind me. But that their capacity for empathy that they showed on that mountain was something that struck me and has stayed with me. And it's something like I've never seen here in the U.S. In fact, if you look at studies, you'll see that empathy is actually on the decline among college students in the U.S. If you think about why that would be or where empathy comes from, empathy, you might think it comes from just the fact that these people in New Guinea are sharing so much of their lives. But I like to say it's not just that. It's also that they share their deaths. They share everything. So people just die, and it's not hidden away. It's right there for everybody to see, and it happens over and over again. And when you live through this, you start to get a sense of your vulnerability, which is actually a really important part of wonder. And you also look around and you see we share this vulnerability, and that's the heart of empathy. In our society, we've closed ourselves off into boxes. If you look over the last 100 years, we've spread out into more and more boxes, shopped in bigger boxes, and looked through these boxes. And then we just simply started building more boxes and shopping in even bigger boxes and looking through these boxes until by the year 2000, Robert Putnam was able to say we're bowling alone, one of many indicators that American community is on the decline. Another way of saying this is Livian de Couture's phrase, the capsular civilization, where we live in capsules and then put ourselves in other capsules to transport us to the next capsule, never really encountering the world as we move. There's a great story that demonstrates this by Peter White. Peter White grew up in the 1950s, and he talks about how he explored everywhere unsupervised. He could run around his neighborhood unsupervised as a small child. Then he learned to ride a bike so he could go even further. And then eventually in his teen years, he started hitchhiking. These are all things that we can't imagine letting our kids do these days. He talks about how normal it was, and it was so normal that he just had to do it, even though he's blind. And you think about a blind kid in the 1950s could do all of those things, even learning to ride a bike, and he had the scars to prove it, but that's just what you did in the 1950s. And now we're now raising our kids to the point where we're losing so much ground that our kids used to be able to explore and wonder about. One study by Mayor Hillman showed that our kids are exploring 1/9 of the area that their parents' generation did. We're putting them on leashes. In New Guinea, this is a picture from New Guinea. I don't know if you see the difference here. That's a leash, that's a knife. And it's more than just that, right? It's all of us. It's not just our kids, it's not what we're doing to our kids, it's all of us. We're all finding ways to encapsulate ourselves, to not embrace our vulnerability, finding ways to feel safe. And so we look down, we don't look up. And as Brene Brown said, she says, we are the most addicted, medicated, obese, in debt, and busy adult cohort in human history. She goes on to say that we are numbing ourselves, and you cannot numb emotions selectively. So you can't numb yourself to the possibility of pain and rejection without also numbing yourself to the possibilities of joy and connection. And so here we are back in our school and back at the end of wonder. In a place where there's 3 billion people on the planet connecting and collaborating, which could be a union of the most amazing things. We've created huge institutions, poured millions of dollars into them to create a space where wonder can thrive. And now we add 3 billion people on the planet connecting and collaborating that enter into that space. And that knowledge machine enters as a distraction device. It's not used, it's not leveraged, it simply enters out as a distraction device. And it's even worse than that. You might have seen the valedictorian speech from a couple years ago. I actually wrote down just a little bit of it here because it was so powerful. This is from Erica Goldson, valedictorian. So this is one of our best. And she graduates and she says, "So I wonder, why did I even want this position? Sure, I earned it, but what will come of it? I have no interest because I saw every subject of study as work, and I excelled at every subject just for the purpose of excelling, not learning, and quite frankly, now I'm scared." And that's what happens to our very best. And I think it really underscores another end of wonder, which is not the end of wonder, the historical end of wonder, which seems to be upon us, but a reclaiming of the end of wonder as the purpose of wonder. It helps us see what the purpose of wonder might be. And I want to show you what wonder might look like, or what it does look like, because we've all experienced it. This is in Wellington, New Zealand last year where it never snows, and then it did. And so all these people are trapped in this state of wonder. They're brought into this state of wonder. And you can see what happens, right? They embrace discomfort. They feel like they don't want to shut out the snow. They don't want to run into the stores. They start running out of them to dance in it. And they feel more connected. You see strangers talking to each other, people taking pictures of themselves together. This is what wonder feels like. It feels like you're more connected with each other, with the world. It's a space where even a walk can seem enchanted. And there's really this two sides of wonder. There's the elation part. There's the awe of it all, like where you feel like you're in a state of wonder. But there's also the side of wonder where you wonder about, where elation turns to contemplation. And this contemplation isn't merely analytical or critical. It's creative and connective. It's this sort of childlike joy of participation. And there's this sense as you look at the world that everything's connected, that everything flows into other things. And in that way, everything matters. And true wonder is not something that's exhausted by answers. The answers themselves become new questions. And so it never leaves us. And I think that's the most important thing I want to say about wonder, is that we often think of it as an experience, like it has to snow in Wellington for us to feel a sense of wonder. But that's not the case at all. It's a little bit like love. Like we make the same mistake about love. We think it's an experience. And so when we're young, if you're a guy, you try to be cool. And if you're a girl, you try to be hot. And then you try to win love, right? You try to bring that experience to you. But as you get older, you realize that love is something you do. It's a capacity. You can get better at it. And as you get better at it, more love comes back to you. The more you give, the more it comes back. And wonder is actually the same way. It's not just an experience. It's something that you can get better at. It's a capacity. And we can create schools and communities and a culture that nurtures this type of wonder. And I want to end with this thought. I'm thinking about Wilson, and at some point in his life, he's going to feel that he's in a thicket of questions. Right? Like there's no way through. That's how wonder feels. And I just want you to know that when you see that thicket of questions, don't think you're lost. Just turn around and you'll see you've been blazing your own trail. Thanks.